Do you wish you could play a build where every one of your martial character's attacks created a large area of effect damage? Do you want to deal good damage to a bunch of enemies with a single hit and apply a bunch of statuses to them? Do you want to see your enemies fall before you and be unable to stand back up? Do you want to drink on the job and actually perform better because of it? Hail, adventurer. My name is Myotis, and I've got a Punch-Drunk Bastard Wildheart Barbarian build for you today. We're going to wield the Punch-Drunk Bastard Greatclub. We're going to deal mass amounts of thunder damage to apply reverberation, while also applying bleeding, maimed, and dazed. And we're going to have high damage and high hit chance thanks to Great Weapon Master and the Tiger aspect of the beast. The great thing about this build is not only will we be dealing excellent area of effect melee damage, but as we stack reverberation and knock enemies prone, they'll be unable to stand back up thanks to the main condition. This is applied by the Wolverine aspect of the beast, so long as an enemy you hit with a melee attack is bleeding. And while raging, we'll be able to make the Tiger's Bloodlust attack, which causes enemies to bleed. This is great for locking enemies in place so you can keep dealing large amounts of damage to them, or to trap them inside area of effect spells from your companions, like Cloud of Daggers and Darkness. You could use this build on any character like a Tav or a Dark Urge, and I even think something about the Wildheart Barbarian really fits the Dark Urge, something about paving your path with blood. But it's also great on some of our companions. Karlach is the obvious choice since her canon class is the Barbarian, but I actually use this class on lae'zel in my Honor Mode playthrough. Grappling with the existential crisis of the reality of Lakith, just turn lae'zel to the drink. So I'm going to build this character out on our Githyanki friend, but any choice here would be fine. I think Gale has an especially whimpery rage shout. So of course lae'zel is a Githyanki. This gives her astral knowledge so she can learn all the skills of a particular ability score until the long rest. She also gets the cantrip Mage Hand, as well as a few armor and weapon proficiencies, but we'll get all of these from Barbarian anyway. If you were doing this as a custom character, Wood Elf is great for the bonus movement, which is important on any martial character, and Half-Orcs actually make especially good Barbarians, thanks to their brutal critical ability and relentless endurance that keeps them up in a fight a little bit longer. Any background for this character would be fine. lae'zel starts out as a soldier, giving her proficiency in athletics and intimidation. These are definitely two skills that we want a character like this to have. Barbarians are great at athletic checks, and they have a bunch of unique intimidation checks throughout the game, which is more important if this is your main dialogue character. The main skills we'll be looking to get are athletics, intimidation, survival, and perception, so any background that gives you a couple of those would be perfect. Just try to pick something that fits your roleplay for your character. Now as an origin character, lae'zel has to start as a level 1 fighter, so let's go visit our good friend Withers to change that.
As thou desire.
Now as a level 1 barbarian, we get two things. The first of course being rage, giving us resistance to piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning damage, and 2 extra damage on melee, improvised weapon, and throwing weapon attacks. Of course with a small drawback that we can't cast spells, but we're not going to have any. We also gain unarmored defense. This will let us add both our dexterity and constitution modifiers to our armor class as long as we're not wearing any armor. Then we can look at our ability score spread. This is actually pretty close to what we want. I'm just going to take these points out of charisma to put them into dexterity. This will give us an additional point of AC and initiative. Then we'll use our first feat to increase strength and constitution both by 1 for an 18 and 16 in them respectively. And this spread also lets us keep a couple of points in wisdom. It's a really important saving throw, so you don't want this to be too low. Then for our skills, we got intimidation and athletics from our soldier background, and we don't really need animal handling, especially since as a Wildheart Barbarian we'll get access to speak with animals. So instead I want to put that point into survival. A barbarian is not particularly good at skill checks, but at least they can be helpful finding things in the environment. We'll confirm those and go to level 2. We're going to spend most of these character levels in Barbarian, and here we get Danger Sense, which is supposed to give us advantage on dexterity saving throws against traps, spells, and surfaces, but as far as I'm aware this is bugged and actually doesn't work right now. If I'm wrong about that, people can correct me in the comments. But we do get Reckless Attack, which does work. This gives us advantage on attack rolls at the cost of giving our enemies advantage on attack rolls against us until our next turn, which for Barbarian is actually more of a boon than it is a hindrance. Barbarians are really good tanks because of their large pool of hit points and damage resistances, so we actually want enemies to target us in combat instead of our allies. The AI of enemies will prioritize successful attacks, so if we have a lower AC than our companions and attacks have advantage against us, it's more likely that they'll target us. Now let's hit level 3. Since we're a Githyanki, we'll get a once per long rest casting of Enhanced Leap, and we get to pick our Barbarian subclass. And we'll be taking Wildheart Barbarian. This lets us cast Speak with Animals, which honestly I often forget this character has, and we get to pick our Bestial Heart. I actually think all of these choices are really good and you can make really interesting builds with all of them. But for our purposes, we're going to take Tiger Heart. This makes it so that when we're raging, our jump distance is increased by 4.5 meters, and we get the Tiger's Bloodlust action. This lets us make a melee attack that can hit up to 3 creatures at once, and this inflicts the creature's hit with 2 turns of bleed without them rolling a saving throw to resist it. Any effect that's automatically applied on a hit is really powerful and worth paying attention to. We also get to pick some piercings, and I think the Tiger piercings look perfectly fine on lae'zel. So let's go to level 4. We can change our bestial heart each time we level up. I'm going to leave it on Tiger, but if you wanted some extra tankiness in the early game, you could start the first levels as Bear Heart, and then switch to Tiger when we get a relevant ability at level 6. For now though, we get to pick a feat, and you're going to take one of 2. We definitely would like an ability score improvement to bump these stats up, but you could also take Great Weapon Master now if you'd like. We'll definitely take it with our next feat if we don't now, but because of Reckless Attack, Barbarians have a great way to offset the -5 attack roll penalty to Great Weapon Master, so they're one of the classes that's really good at taking this feat quite early. If you really know what you're doing, this is probably what I'd suggest, but I think for a lot of players, you're better to just improve your stats early. Improving your hit chance, even just by a couple points, can be really helpful. So let's move on to level 5. Here we get 2 abilities. We're going to get Extra Attack finally. Extra Attack is one of our biggest power spikes as a weapon user, basically doubling our damage output. And with the Tiger's Bloodlust attack potentially hitting 3 creatures, it's essentially like we're making 6 attacks a turn that deal a little bit less damage than a normal hit. We also get Fast Movement, increasing our movement by 3 meters as long as we're not wearing heavy armor. Movement is really important for melee characters, so this is a great additional ability to get. And since we're a Githyanki, we also get access to Misty Step. We can't cast this while we're raging, but you only have a few rages every long rest, so if you happen to have some racial spells, you might find yourself using them in less important fights where you don't need to rage. Now we can go to level 6 where the build is really going to start coming together. We get to choose our first animal aspect as a Wildheart Barbarian, the most important of which is Wolverine. This makes it so that whenever we attack a bleeding or poisoned target, we also maim them. Now maim reduces a creature's movement speed to 0, and if you'll remember, our Tiger's Bloodlust attack inflicts bleeding on targets, and this Wolverine ability checks for the bleeding condition after making the attack. So a single hit from Tiger's Bloodlust will inflict both bleeding and maimed, potentially locking up to 3 enemies in place. This is such a useful combo that's built right into this subclass. You can lock prone enemies onto the ground, you can trap enemies in dangerous hazards, and you can protect your squishy allies from enemies approaching them. And the disadvantage on dexterity saving throws can also be taken advantage of by the casters on your team. Let's keep trudging along to level 7. Here we actually get a really important barbarian ability. Feral Instinct gives us a +3 bonus to initiative, and we can't be surprised. It's basically like getting a mini alert feat. And this is a character that does really want to act early in initiative, so you can lock grouped enemies in place with Tiger's Bloodlust before they get the chance to spread out. Then we can go to level 8 for our second feat. Thanks to being a Wildheart Barbarian, we gain land stride so we can ignore difficult terrain. And then we're either going to pick up Great Weapon Master or ability score improvement, depending on which you picked at level 4. So for me, that'll be Great Weapon Master. Aside from jumping and shoving, we don't have a lot of uses for our bonus action after our initial rage in the first turn, so we'll be able to make great use of the extra bonus action attack whenever we crit or kill a creature. And the +10 to damage is applied to our Tiger's Bloodlust attacks, so this is a huge increase to our damage potential. But even at this point, I still want a couple of more levels of Barbarian. At level 9 we get Brutal Critical, which is not a particularly great ability. Since we'll usually have advantage on attacks because of Reckless Attack, we will crit a little bit more often, so that extra damage die is nice. It's just not that reliable of an ability at level 9. The last Barbarian feature I want comes at level 10. Here we get to pick our second animal aspect, and this time we're going to take Aspect of the Beast Tiger. This lets us add our strength modifier an additional time to attack rolls against bleeding and poison targets. This also gives us proficiency in survival, but we already have it from level 1, and I don't want to wait 10 levels to pick it up here. But now after the first time we apply bleeding to a creature, our hit chance against that creature skyrockets. This is exactly the same reason that the Tavern Brawler feat is broken. Applying your ability modifiers multiple times to attack rolls absolutely destroys the balance of bounded accuracy. You'll see a jump against high AC targets from a 65 to 70% hit chance all the way up to 90 or 95%. You could drink elixirs of Cloud Giant Strength to get even more benefit out of this, but I also think Bloodlust elixirs are a little bit more thematic for the build, since we'll be using Tiger's Bloodlust all the time. Now at level 11, we're probably going to branch off into another class. You could just keep going 12 levels into Barbarian. This would give you a third feat, so you could increase your strength to 20, but I kind of want to switch gears here and add some fighter levels. Second Wind won't be super useful to us because we're going to be a low-level fighter, but Barbarians don't otherwise have access to fighting styles. And here we can grab Great Weapon Fighting, letting us reroll 1s and 2s on our weapon damage die for a small boost in average damage. Then we can take our final level and we're going to remain fighter to get Action Surge. Action Surge is just one of the strongest abilities in the game. We'll be able to rage with our bonus attack and then Action Surge to make 4 attacks at the start of combat. We want to start applying maim to as many enemies as we can. And before we get into equipment, let's talk about 1 or 2 other multi-class options. So when I ran this build in my honor mode playthrough, I actually didn't have the levels of fighter. I was building a team around darkness, so I needed lae'zel to be able to see in that darkness, so I took 2 levels of warlock for Devil's Sight. So if you're doing something similar, I think that would make sense, but if you're not building around darkness, then I think the fighter levels are better. Otherwise, it would be nice to have some rogue levels in this build. Getting expertise on athletics would make it easier to throw and shove enemies closer together so that we can hit them all with Tiger's Bloodlust. And cutting action dash would give us more mobility in a fight and something to do with our otherwise underutilized bonus action. Even a 3rd level for the thief subclass would let us both rage and drink alcohol in the first turn of combat. And that's an important part of this build because hoo boy, we be drinking. The drunk condition only lasts a few turns, so you have to pay attention and make sure that you're keeping that up for the bonuses from the Punch-Drunk Bastard. I also like elixirs of Bloodlust as our elixir of choice. There are a couple of items that we want to pick up in Act 1. First, we need a weapon that we can use until we can get Punch-Drunk Bastard in Act 2, and since we're kind of building around thunder damage, I think it would be best to get Hammer Aft. This just deals thunder damage when we jump, but I can still let it apply reverberation with some of our other items. The first of which is the Gloves of Belligerent Skies. This adds 2 stacks of reverberation anytime we deal thunder damage, which won't be too often in the beginning of the game, but partway through Act 2 we'll be able to do it on every attack. Then we also want the Boots of Stormy Clamor. This will apply reverberation every time we inflict a condition, and with Tiger's Bloodlust at level 3, that will be every attack from very early on in the game. Then the Ring of Absolute Focus won't do much for us in the early game, but once we're dealing more thunder damage, that 1 additional thunder damage will actually add up quite a bit. Then in Act 2 we'll be able to pick up the Punch-Drunk Bastard. Obviously this is the crux of the build. This makes it so that whenever we're drunk we have advantage on attack rolls and we create a small AoE blast of thunder damage. And this AoE is applied with every attack. That includes the separate instances of Tiger's Bloodlust. So if you're able to hit 2 or 3 creatures with a single Tiger's Bloodlust, you can end up with multiple thunder damage explosions. And since our thunder damage will be applying reverberation, we also want the Ring of Spiteful Thunder. This makes it so that whenever we deal thunder damage to a reverberating creature, they also become dazed. They do get to make a Constitution saving throw to resist it, but I find it gets applied quite often. Dazed gives creatures disadvantage on Wisdom saving throws, making it much easier for your allies to impose debilitating spell effects like Hold Person or Fear. To make sure we're always applying thunder damage even when we're not drunk, I suggest getting the Drake Throat Glaive and using it to target Punch-Drunk Bastard with the thunder version of the Draconic Elemental Weapon ability. You don't need a creature to keep Drake Throat Glaive equipped. You can just have lae'zel drop the Greatclub, equip Drake Throat Glaive, target Punch-Drunk Bastard, and then pick it back up to equip it. We can also grab the Thunderskin Cloak in Act 2. This just makes it so that if a reverberating creature deals damage to us, they have to roll a con save or become dazed. Since we'll often be the target with our low AC, this can actually get applied a lot. We also get our first solid chest piece in this act. The +2 to our strength score should bring us up to 20, which is a solid boost to our hit chance and damage. And then if you are doing some kind of a fog cloud or darkness composition and don't want to take the warlock levels for Devil's Sight, you can equip the Eversight ring on this character. Catching enemies in a blinding effect and maiming them so they can't move out is a really powerful strategy, but when you're doing something like that, the Eversight ring is also a pretty hotly contested item, so you may or may not be able to fit it onto this character. Then in Act 3 we get another important piece of our drunken equipment. The Amulet of the Drunkard will heal us 1d8 hit points at the start of our turns while we're drunk, but more importantly, it'll increase the duration of drunk from 2 rounds up to 5 rounds. That way you don't have to apply it nearly as often. You can also upgrade the Mighty Cloth to the Bone Spike Garb. This gives us some temp HP when we rage and reduces incoming damage by 2, as well as deals piercing damage to creatures that make melee attacks against us, equal to our Constitution modifier. Now you could argue that if you don't naturally have 20 strength, the Mighty Cloth might still be better here, but we're probably going to get hit a lot, so that damage reduction is really important, I think. We'll also get the Bone Spike Helmet. This can deal some psychic damage to creatures around us when we rage. It also increases our intimidation checks, and it lets us make a Battlemaster menacing attack once per turn. Now most of the time we'll be using Tiger's Bloodlust instead, but this is a great optional attack to have if creatures are either immune to bleeding or you're just up against one attacker. You still want to be using Tiger's Bloodlust to inflict maim, but if you've maimed a creature and still have an attack left, then you can use the menacing attack. You could also swap your boots to the Bone Spike boots, but I think the reverberation stacks are probably better. Sadly though, the Drunken Cloth is just not very good. We're not a character that cares about advantage on Constitution saving throws, and the little bit of temp HP just won't go very far. Now as always, the last thing I like to talk about in these builds is team synergy. They lay down a lot of different conditions, they lock enemies into place, and they deal really good damage while taking a lot of damage. We're really great at trapping enemies in place, so characters with great area of effect spells like Cloud of Daggers and Darkness, such as Warlocks and Beastmaster Rangers, would love to have this character on their team. You also wouldn't mind allies that can easily move targets around to group them together for Tiger's Bloodlust, and knock creatures prone more easily to trap them on the ground with main. So characters like Repelling Blast Warlocks, Battle Masters with Trip and Push Attack, and Berserker Throwers are all great alongside this character. Then since we apply a lot of the Dazed condition, characters like Bards, Sorcerers, Wizards, and Clerics that want to target creatures' wisdom saving throws with control effects are also going to be a good fit. So what do you think of this Punch-Drunk Bastard build? I really think that some of the Wildheart Barbarian builds are some of the most fun in the game. Tiger's Bloodlust especially has a ton of different applications. This is just one of them that's kind of fun and interesting, but also really powerful. Make sure to like the video and subscribe for future build guides. There's a playlist of everything so far in the description. So until the next time, happy adventuring.